This is episode 5 of Democracy After Disaster, a 9-part documentary podcast series that is best listened to in order from episode 1. Whether you think there was a quiet, intuitive whisper in Steve Pascoe's ear or a piece of random happenstance will depend on how you view the world. But a couple of years before 2020, Steve decided to look up his cousin.
We hadn't seen each other for 40 years and went down to Mallacoota camping one time.
Mallacoota is located on the eastern tip of Victoria, a relatively unspoiled wilderness home to an abundance of flora and fauna.
And I know he's down here. I probably should ring up. And Bruce, he's 10 years older than me.
So it turns out Steve's cousin is Bruce Pascoe, Indigenous author of Dark Emu and other books. Here he is talking on the ABC about where he lives at Genoa, or as he explains it, Genoa. Genoa is 23 kilometres west of Mallacoota at the confluence of the Genoa and Wollagara rivers that merge and flow together the rest of the way to meet the sea at Mallacoota.
My name is Bruce Pascoe and I'm Bunurong, Panalapana and Ewan, and I'm living on the very southern end of Ewan land. To live on country has a special feeling, it means everything. We're on the junction of 3 rivers here. They've all got Aboriginal names. 60 to 70% of place names in Australia are Aboriginal names, and the name should be regarded like a treasure. Maramingo is the fish spear. Mingo, spear. Maramingo, place of fish spear. The Wollagara, we're not really sure what Wollagara means, and that's a shame. It means that we've lost a bit of our history, but we're going to regain it. The Jino means the foot. Most Australian Aboriginal languages have Jina or Jinang or Jino as the word for foot, and it doesn't mean simply the foot. It usually means a pathway to something important, and in this case it's one of the song lines up to Mount Kosciuszko. To have as the name of your town or river the word Jino is a real privilege, because it's talking about songline, it's talking about ceremony. Mallacoota means sacred white pipe clay. All the different clans around here know it as that, because all the clans would receive white pipe clay from this country here. And both names, Mallacoota and Jino, are ceremonial names, they're spiritual names. And I would love...
So I got his phone number, rang, and we met for coffee with his partner Lynn, and we chatted and that sort of thing. And Lynn was the lieutenant of the fire brigade. And I said, how are you doing? I said, we've got lots of issues with Delp and parts of Victoria in their fire management and just burning stuff. We think we're doing it wrong, and I don't think they're protecting our town. And at that stage I was working for EMV.
That's Emergency Management Victoria.
Developing a model for community-based fuel fire management planning. So trust the community, bring the agencies to community.
But fuel management is, dare I say it, an inflammatory topic. And communities are not cardboard cutouts. They have character and context and complexity, some more than others.
Mallacoota, a number of years ago, suffered a really terrible split, I suppose, is the best way to put it.
This is Lynn Harwood, Lieutenant of the Mallacoota Fire Brigade and Steve's cousin's partner. And
it could be sort of really generally broken down to the Greens, those people who are here because of how beautiful this place is, and the business people.
Mallacoota is also home to one of the last remaining caches of abalone in the world. But supporting the growth of the abalone industry and preserving the coastal environment has created strong division within the town.
In 2010, there was a proposal to develop a boat ramp by building a breaker wall, and this became the source of terrible conflict.
It was awful. It was really awful. It went to the courts and it went on for years, and it nearly broke people. You know, I don't mean financially, I mean emotionally. It split the town so that people wouldn't go to that person's shop or ask this person to do their plumbing or whatever. It was a really awful time. The Shire was terrible, which is why people felt so let down. There also is a history that Mallacoota doesn't get a councillor on because we've got too few people, so we're not on council.
Mallacoota is 6 hours drive from Melbourne and 7 hours from Sydney, and the people in the district live on the traditional country of 4 Indigenous nations: Bidawal, Gunai-Kurnai, Monero and Yuin. It's part of the East Gippsland Shire, but is nearly 3 hours to the council offices in Bairnsdale. The council has 9 elected councillors representing the whole Shire. There are no wards. And councillors in East Gippsland are not allocated portfolios or areas of responsibility. So it's just one giant electorate with 9 people who can come from anywhere and focus on whatever they like. And that inevitably means some places and some issues are forgotten.
So there is this feeling of us being on our own and being the last to be asked about our opinion or what we would want. If something happens, it's that someone else decides what happens. So there is that very strong that very strong anti-government, anti-councillors and anti-Shire feeling.
So with this history and Steve's support, Lynn set out to bring people in her community together with people from government to talk about fuel management in the forests surrounding the town. And we'll hear how this unfolded in a later episode. In the meantime, with the 30-year boat ramp conflict alive and well, the summer of 2019-2020 was bearing down. This is Democracy After Disaster, a podcast about power and money and how communities recovering from bushfire or any disaster need to be empowered in their recovery if they're not to be further harmed by the systems meant to help them. My name's Kate Lawrence, and in this 5th episode we come forward to the bushfires which raged across Australia in 2019-2020. And in particular, we'll focus on recovery in the community of Mallacoota. They're now called the Black Summer bushfires. Such was the length and scale and impact of the fires that burnt across mostly eastern Australia from September 2019 to February 2020.
It was a black summer that most Australians will never forget.
There can be no doubt that the harrowing experiences of this bushfire season will long linger in our national psyche.
To the south there were bushfires, to the west there were bushfires, to the north there were bushfires.
An inferno bearing down on the town of Stanthorpe.
Every single state and territory affected.
There are 13 fires burning at emergency level across Victoria. More than 10 emergency warnings are in place in New South Wales.
We have literally a circle of flames around all the houses in Kapara.
I'm about to go down and have a look at what's left in my house.
These conditions are going to be much worse than predicted.
11 fires.
There are 54 fires.
We've got 70 fires blazing around the state.
Across the country, 33 people were killed, more than 10 million hectares burnt, and 3,000 homes were destroyed. Millions of native animals perished, along with 80,000 head of livestock.
Watching from afar, Steve paid particular attention to Mallacoota. On the 28th of December, a lightning strike started a bushfire about 40 kilometres from Mallacoota, with catastrophic weather conditions on the way. December and January are peak tourism season in Mallacoota, with the town swelling from around 1,200 people to over 10,000. By New Year's Eve, the town is completely hemmed in by fire, with one road in and one road out through miles and miles and miles of forest. It's too late to leave. The weather gauge at Mallacoota shows 49 degrees and 80-kilometre winds. The fire barrels along a 10-kilometre front straight towards the town.
So we've got embers going into Mallacoota at the moment. We've got 4,000 people on the beach there that are being very well protected by our firefighters.
I've never seen anything like it.
A township cowering under a red sky. The residents of Mallacoota were told to get in the water when they heard warning sirens.
If they were in Mallacoota, the safest place for them to stay was definitely in Mallacoota.
By 8 in the morning, the temperature had peaked at 49 degrees, with winds gusting up to 80 kilometres an hour and embers falling.
These fires, particularly in East Gippsland, overnight and throughout yesterday, were creating their own weather. That's how fierce, that's how active those fires were.
Mate, you just don't want to go through something like this. It was terrifying. And I'm a bit emotional still.
Locals and tourists have been stranded in Mallacoota after fires ravaged the town and cut off roads. This morning, those desperate to leave finally had a way out.
Anybody that registered and asked to be evacuated by sea will be taken, so nobody will be left behind.
The town loses all power. More than 120 houses are burnt to the ground, and the road into Mallacoota is impassable for 3 weeks. The Victorian state government asks for military support from the federal government, and on January the 1st, the Royal Australian Navy arrives in Mallacoota, bringing essential medical supplies, food and fuel. They eventually evacuate hundreds of people in the HMAS Chulz. Malacoota's isolation and beauty, the images of thousands of tourists trapped on the beach, and their dramatic rescue make headlines around the world. Following along from his home in Strathewen, Steve might not know exactly what's happening in Mallacoota, but he knows only too well the impact, and more importantly, he knows what's coming.
Lynn was busy, so I kept ringing and leaving messages, let me know how you're going, and when you need, I can come and help, and such and such and such, just let me know.
Steve eventually got hold of Lynn and said,
well, I think we've got a model here in Strathewen that would work in Mallacoota.
Lynn set to work gathering a small group of trusted community leaders, and Steve set to work trying to find a way to get to Mallacoota.
So I rang John and said, can you get me into Mallacoota? Can you fly me in? Because there was flights going, and Red Cross is one of the organisations that can get people in. He discovered that he couldn't. The bureaucracy was set up that he couldn't get into it. It was a state-level thing. So he put me onto the state operations manager. She was good, and she said, leave it with me, Steve. And she rang an hour later and said, right, you're on a flight tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock in Sale, be there, be square. So I grabbed my bags and got in this plane flying into Mallacoota. Got to Mallacoota Airport, hitched a ride into town, and went to the fire station and found Lynn. She'd organised 4 or 5 good community leaders, and I just told the story about Strathewen and this is what's available, and this is what we can do, and if you think this might work for Mallacoota, I'm happy to help. If you don't think, I'm going home. And I'll just stay with Lynn for a little while, and we'll sort her place out, and then I'll go home. So this little group said, yeah, I think we're going to need a different way, because if we don't, this is going to go to hell in a handbasket. And they got it, because it's the democratic thing.
And because it's the democratic thing, just like the community leaders in Strathewen, this small group realised they had no authority to speak or act on anyone else's behalf.
We'll die 1,000 deaths if we go off and start making decisions. We can't do that. I said, no, you're right. Let's get the leaders of community organisations together. So 40 community organisations were invited. They, wonderful proof, they did the phone calls. They rang everyone and said, we're doing this, we'll be at the school, we're thinking this, we'd like you to come along. And out of 40 organisations, we expected 15 people to turn up, and 60 people turned up. So it was a big thing. It was important. And I just repeated the story, the Strathewen story. This is how it works. This is what could happen. This is the upsides. This is the downsides. Blah blah blah. I mean, this sort of gave a bit of an introduction. And so, do you think we should keep going? And Nancy said, that's sick. We're not selling anything. We just need. Do you think this is a good idea? And should we keep going? And out of the 60, 58 hands went up. We called them the thinking group rather than the planning group or the steering committee, or we called them the thinking group because that kind of meant nothing and it was soft.
So over the next 2 weeks, Steve worked with the thinking group to come up with a proposal.
And over that 2 weeks, everything was evolving and there was anger and bubble to the surface and there was division was starting to happen and the toxic leaders were starting to manipulate. So we presented the idea of a community association with a 12-person committee.
And the community liked the idea, so the thinking group kept going, developing the draft rules and structures and organising the election of the committee, regularly going back to the community at each stage to check in that there was approval. As an outsider in the community with such history of division, Steve played a very particular and crucial role.
As part of my role working with Lynn and the group was that I would step up in the front of meetings and tell the story and give the proposals, because I get to go home. If Lynn did that or anyone else, they would either be hated or loved, or hated by half and loved by half, whereas I could be hated by everyone or loved by everyone and it still didn't matter.
Once the process had started and Steve was snuggled up back in Strathewen, Mallacoota began the long, slow, difficult road of recovery.
You don't come to Mallacoota for retail therapy, nor do you come to Mallacoota for architecture. It's pretty ugly CBD, but the natural beauty is amazing.
This is Jenny Lloyd, who was instrumental in Mallacoota's recovery, and she's taking me on a cook's tour of the town.
So the fires came right through here. It's hard to tell now. We lost 123 homes. It was 8% of our housing stock.
Jenny Lloyd has a head for demographics, which she put to great use in the recovery process.
Per capita, we've got the highest Greens vote in Victoria and one of the highest take-ups of solar per capita in Victoria.
Later she tells me Mallacoota is the most remote town in Victoria and one of the oldest. Quite the combination. Older, retired greenies living as far from the big smoke as possible. Like many residents of Mallacoota, Jenny and her husband moved there when they retired about 13 years ago. We pull off the road into a clearing tucked behind trees lining the road, and there on a flat gravel expanse, surrounded by a high cyclone fence, are what look like half a dozen shipping containers. A duller attraction would be hard to imagine, but Jenny is thrilled.
This is our 1 megawatt battery.
This battery can power the town for about 4 hours. While its genesis was before the fires in the work of the Mallacoota Sustainable Energy Group, it was of great importance in the recovery.
During the fires, we got cut off from the world for 3 weeks, and we were relying on camping gear, or some of us had generators. But because we couldn't get unleaded petrol, they had to ration it. The petrol rationing got so bad that we had to only turn it on for a couple of hours just to keep the cold in fridges and freezers and then turn it off.
Jenny spent 21 years in the Navy and now 21 years in the Navy Reserves. She knows her way around a committee, a team, and, it turns out, a community. Next we visit the town's main industry, the abalone co-op factory.
That got burnt, and because then they were further impacted by COVID because they lost a lot of their overseas markets. So it's pretty flushing out.
We move on to the local SES and CFA sheds.
We're getting a brand new, tri-service facility, state-of-the-art, on that site, which will house the SES, the Coast Guard and the Surf Lifesavers. So this is a real win for community activism that we're getting this. The fire came through here. Visiting fire crews had to drive through the fire. One of the first things that had to be defended was the CFA shed. And people would come to seek shelter in the CFA shed. So pretty traumatic when the thing that's supposed to defend you is itself under siege.
After the fires, Jenny was elected onto the first committee of MADRA, Mallacoota and District Recovery Association, the organisation set up by the community through the process Steve and Lynn started.
The Victorian Electoral Committee paid for an election. 44 people put their hands up.
So that's 44 candidates for 12 positions. And the result was?
People from their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. 6 men, 6 women.
A remarkable result. Apparently suspiciously so.
Somebody actually wrote to us and said that this was a conspiracy, that it would not have turned out that way.
Once on the committee, Jenny found she was the only person who actually had any background in government.
And I realised very quickly that so many people don't know how government works, and they don't know how funding works, and they don't know that asset budgets are siloed from operating budgets in many cases. So what seems like common sense? Now, why can't you just do this? In reality, it doesn't work that way because we have so many checks and balances.
Jenny also had community training.
I did my master's in community development, so absolutely the power of networks. And that's what got us through. The informal networks as much as the formal ones.
Given her background and skills, it was natural that Jenny would step into a key role in negotiating with government.
So one of my first jobs in the Recovery Association was to advocate for people who had lost everything but their house. So there's all these grey areas of policy where we had to say, come on, we're all human. The other grey areas were around people that were wrecking. Some of the people that could have lived here, and people offered their blocks of land. Someone could put a caravan on here. I'm happy for them to do that. Council would let them do it. So those people who had often lost everything, the only thing they had left was their social networks and their community connections. And now we've been told, well, we've got a house for you in Ordos. So the last thing they had left of them is going to be taken from them.
Finally, we arrive at Jenny's house. High on the hill, a modern, comfortable kit home with a wraparound veranda and a $1 million view across the water. Jenny and I had discovered a commonality. We had both lived through the death of our partner.
I don't believe in an upstairs, but there is an upstairs. Jeff's looking down going, stand her to the drop. And he'd be right.
He actually died at home. And that was one of the beautiful things. They say less than 15% of people get to die at home. He was able to die at home, facing a sea. He was a Navy warrant officer. That was a beautiful thing.
Jenny and I touched the slow rolling underworld ocean of grief we both know so well, and breathe in and out. And as humans tend to do, we ground back through story and humour.
Didn't want a funeral, but I wanted to think community. And I started talking to a couple of the girls and said, look, I want to cater an event, like just have people here. And they said, bloody bullshit, will you cater it? We could all cook. So they drew up this roster. You're going to bring that, you're going to bring that, she's going to bring that. Went and informed so-and-so she was going to bring that.
And back to the task at hand, discussing recovering Mallacoota.
One of the things that we did really well was right from the outset, we said we are going to be statesmanlike, diplomatic, evidence-based. We will have a business case. We will not treat our bureaucrats as enemies, because at the end of the day, they don't hold the power. So we said we're going to give them a red-hot shot at doing their jobs, but inevitably there will be decisions that they don't have the authority to make. So we will then go to the relevant minister. And escalate's a strong word, and I wouldn't have said we would escalate it, but we would be happy to say to the minister, this department does not have the authority to do this. We think this is the appropriate solution for this particular problem, and we would like you to give consideration to changing that legislative structure. I think we did it once. And our bureaucrats bent over backwards for us, that they were brave enough to come to community consultation sessions and talk And it was really well received. We had a case of one lady, her house burnt down, and she was living in limbo. She couldn't get a bail rating for her property, the bushfire attack level rating. And she said, I could afford to build to bail rating 40, which is the second highest, but if I have to build to a flame zone, I can't afford to do it. But there had been no decision on her property. So we had Lynn Howard at that stage was doing the fuel management plan. So all the relevant authorities were in the room at the same time. So we got Bushfire Recovery Victoria to come along and be at that meeting, and we were at part of that meeting to put forward this person's case to say we have a few people in town who can't make a decision. So they went out on the spot and made a decision about that bushfire attack level rating. And I saw her about half an hour after that decision. She was still crying, but the relief.
And they didn't just change outcomes in the way they went about their work, they changed people.
So we were able to bring a human factor. And one of the people in that meeting came back to us a couple of hours later, and she said, my mind has been changed. She said, I can't, from Bensdale, see what's happening on the ground. And she said, it's changed the way I will go about doing my role now, understanding that urgency is there and that people can't live in limbo. But if we had been narky or pointed fingers or name-called, we wouldn't have achieved that level of collaboration and cooperation, absolutely not. And we were respected because of it, because we did do our homework and we did recognise the constraints under which government operates.
On top of this principle guiding how MADRA related to governments, based on feedback from the community, the committee came up with 2 core values to guide their recovery work.
Any initiatives that will build resilience in our town, they must be predicated on the health of our environment. People come here because they love the wilderness environment, because they study it, or because they make a living from it. And our economy must respect the environment, our infrastructure must respect the environment. We have to be mindful of Aboriginal heritage and culture, and our social life very much revolves around the environment, like surfing and swimming and fishing. And the other value was, as long as people in our community are suffering, the whole community suffers. So we're as strong as our weakest link. If we abandon our people who are still struggling, we're never going to recover as a community.
So with these 2 strong and simple community values in mind, care for the environment and no one is left behind, and using wide and open consultation processes, Jenny took on the task of writing the recovery plan for the Mallacoota community.
I was the architect, if you like, of the plan. I wrote most of it. I pushed it out. I wasn't precious about the baby. I said, have a look at it. Tell me it's ugly. And people willingly contributed their time and their expertise, and it's a much better product because of that. So as a community, we were on the front foot. So we did have the thinking group who came in early, mentored by Steve Pascoe. He said, if we don't get in early, our recovery will be imposed. So they started the ball rolling.
So Jenny picked up the baton laid down by the thinking group, and she brought a very particular strategic and considered lens to the task of writing the community recovery plan for Mallacoota.
We wrote that plan. It's very much in the language of the audience it's targeting. It is totally a bureaucratic document, and I don't apologise for that, because that's where the bucks are coming from, by and large. And the other reason it's written that way is there were so many grant opportunities, but we wanted people to have all of that information in there so they didn't have to find it themselves. And if quite a few people have done that, grab all of those statistics and use them in... So Parks Victoria, for example, used the recovery plan to get 3 additional positions established in town. And the $50 million, that's direct funding commitment. It doesn't take into account the flow-on impacts of that, so it doesn't take into account 3 extra people employed.
This figure of $50 million was the amount of money Mallacoota had attracted after the fires by the time I visited in November 2022. A figure that was unthinkable before the fires and something Madra was immensely proud of.
We had to write this compelling story, but in ways in which... And my husband was a real estate agent at one stage to follow me around the Navy. And he said, Jenny, the best way to get a free editorial is to count how many words are in those editorials and write the editorial for them so they don't have to do the work. So we wrote the plan so that other people didn't have to do the work. That was the thing that I could bring to the table, having that background in planning. One thing you'll notice in the recovery plan, it's deliberately written in first person, not in third person, which distances us where we are, because it is our plan. It's absolutely the voice of the community.
And while Jenny is rightly proud of the plan from the satisfied position of having written it, getting there was no romp in the park.
A lot of people here were really frustrated because it's been 3 months after the fires. What are you guys doing? What's happening? And remember the shampoo commercial that had, it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. And we had to say to people, look, the wheels of the machinery of government turn slowly, but they are turning. They are turning.
That the Madra Committee was able to keep the faith of their community as they took the time needed to develop the plan in a town with Mallacoota's history of division is extraordinary.
If you told me 3 years ago that we would learn to create consensus in Mallacoota, I'd have laughed. Honestly, I mean, we fought about a bow ramp for 30 years. 30 years. Remarkable. And we are really diverse. We are really, really diverse here. Maybe more than other places.
This is Carol Hopkins, who put her hand up to be secretary of the second Madra after Jenny retired from the committee. Carol is a retired school principal, so like Jenny, she'd had a lifetime working in government.
I've always had a role in working within a major bureaucracy, the education department being one of the biggest ones that exist in Australia. And so I'm very aware of structures and timelines and processes and stuff. And I guess that helps.
The second Madra Committee, including Carol, worked on implementing the plan.
Our recovery plan is some 170 pages, and it's being continually updated by Jenny, who's the eternal keeper of the plan. And has everybody in town met it? Absolutely not. But we all know it exists, and everybody sort of kind of knows what's in it. And they know that it speaks for all of us, and we've all had the opportunity to say what we thought.
And the plan is the document that guides the work and role of Madra.
Our business is limited to what the recovery plan contains and what the people of the town voted for. And so if it wasn't voted for, then it's not Madra business. And sometimes I struggle with this. I'll go racing into a meeting. I've got this really good idea. What about if we do X, Y, Z and A, B, C and da-da-da-da? And the committee will remind me, no, Carol, we're here to do what the town asked for. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. In fact, because you had input into that, they had every opportunity to speak to that. And so that is the document that we work on all the time. So we're always drawn back to that document. We're always back to these are our intentions, these are our values, this is our mission, and these are the things that the town has asked for.
For Carol, there's not only a huge advantage because local folks know about and support the plan, the outcomes of the plan are better because they were generated at the local level.
Place-based discussions about those things end up with projects that are more ecological, economical, popular, environmentally friendly in our instance. and so on. There are huge benefits. Getting things done at the local level is far superior than having some consultant come from God knows where and decide and design this thing.
But while MADRA excelled at managing a community-led recovery process, the systems they were required to work in made putting the plan into action a bit like walking in molasses. Starting with the grants process.
There was so much grant writing had to be done. There's a huge amount of time and effort and paper consumed by a process of writing enough guff so that your application is that thick. We were working on one for the golf club. We were told we needed to get a consultant, and the consultant would cost $24,000. And we said, hello, we're a volunteer organisation. We can't throw $24,000 at something we don't even know will be successful. When an organisation, a volunteer group, has put thousands of hours into pulling together something like that and it's rejected, that is devastating. Absolutely devastating. I understand that people have to be coherent about what they want the money for and how they're going to use it, but honestly.
In addition, the grants processes were often competitive, so pitting community group against community group. And there was another aspect of the grant system that was deeply flawed.
And so many of them did not want to fund wages for anyone. And so that just assumes hundreds of hours of volunteer bloody work in order to get these funds to do whatever the thing is. And then once you've got the funds, it relies on a whole nother ton of volunteer work to get them implemented, to the point where you think you see the grant thing go by and you just think, oh no, I can't. I just can't be bothered. Even though I would like to do X, Y, or Z, I just no, forget it.
You can hear it creeping into Carol's voice. Not there yet, but easily imagined. Burnout.
Each year of MADRA, we've burned out half of the people. So there's been about a half and half turnover each year. And that makes it kind of hard because the new people have quite an uptake of stuff that's gone before them to get to know. Quite a lot of the intricacies of how the groups work, how the organisations work together, who belongs where, what all the acronyms are, all the things. I knew that I was coming on as the secretary, so I had to say to myself, no projects, nothing. I just spent the first couple of months reading everything because I knew I had to get my head around it all, and I had to get my head around it all quickly.
While Carol had nothing but praise for the local shire, something that has changed.
The shire have been terrific in supporting us at the place-based level. We have we have local people who work for the shire who are right here with us, and I think that's a different thing to us pre-bushfire. That absolute genuine willingness of the shire to hear us and try and implement what we ask for.
Again, some of the systems being used by government and agencies were frustrating.
Things like this consultancy model that in order to do a project, you have to send some consultant in who charges hundreds of thousands of dollars to design something that nobody wants. And then half the time then the budget to build the thing is eaten up so much by the consultants. And then half the budget for implementing the damn thing is gone.
In amongst all this talk of recovery and committees and grants and burnout, again, I'm reminded by Carol of why we were talking at all.
When you're living in Armageddon, as we were, it feels like you've lost everything. I mean, even if your house wasn't one of the houses that were lost. And I remember waking up, I don't know how many days in it was, and my husband and I had been doing we'd either been up all night long or we'd just been falling into a couch and sleeping a few hours or whatever. And we got to the idea that I'd sleep from 6 till midnight and he would sleep from midnight till 6 because the fire was burning across the road there. And the wind kept changing and we didn't know whether it was going to come back at us and all that stuff. And I woke up one morning and we were in bed together. And I'd kind of forgotten about everything in that moment of not really being awake. But we were still in our clothes and we stunk. And I smelled us. And then everything came back to me in this rush. And it was like being punched in the stomach. It was absolutely painful to remember everything that had happened. And I lay there in the bed, curled up in a ball, thinking about everything that had happened. But being so grateful that I had a bed. The fact that we still had this house, because we went so close to losing this. It was ridiculous. You feel like everything is lost, but in fact it's not. There's a whole lot of stuff that is actually growing stronger. You just don't know it at the time. And that's leadership. The empowerment of your people, the strengths of the people. They're actually growing, and they're as strong as they've ever been in a moment where you feel like you've lost everything.
I asked Carol if she thought overall community well-being was improved because of the existence of Madra as the community voice.
It is hard to articulate, but I think that we are more cohesive because of the processes that we've worked through since the fire, absolutely. I think we're more cohesive, more connected because we have pulled together, done things together, talked, thought things through together. We still have deep concern and we're still deeply trying to support as much as we can our total loss people. Some of those have not made the kind of progress that you would hope in 3 years, and it's really tough. And so that's always, one of our parts of our mission statement is no one left behind. Well, we are not there yet. We're not whole till everyone's whole. We're not there yet. And so when we had the AGM, not knowing whether there would be a Madra 3, we were down in the community club room on a rainy, shocking, windy, horrible night, standing around wondering whether to put out any shares and wondering whether we'd be going home in 5 minutes. And I was chatting to someone in the kitchen and I turned around, the room was full. I went, oh, there is going to be a Madra 3.
The triumphs and disappointments of community leadership so often relate to whether folks come along for the ride. There are many reasons why it can be a kangaroo hop bumpy jog down the road of community-led recovery. Sometimes people just aren't able to participate. Think parents of young children, carers, people in precarious or remote housing, people struggling with mental or physical health issues, and all carrying the trauma of the disaster. More concerning, perhaps, are the reasons people aren't willing. These range from the mundane, like having a history with someone else who's involved, to the systemic, like past experiences with government and lack of trust in anyone in authority. But within the institutions of government are people, often people from the local community who believe in working for community and try their damnedest to do that in a system that corrals and contains and categorises their every move. That means to do what they know is needed in community might mean going against their employer, and that doing what their employer demands might mean compromising their own values. In the next episode, we're going to meet one such person, a good, caring and hard-working former public servant who's walked the tough road alongside communities in recovery.
We tend to stay inside our offices and service centres because the organisation wants us to be there where they can work with us, and forgetting, of course, that we need to turn ourselves inside out and be out there with the people so that they can participate in their own government.
Before we head to that episode, though, given that we're just over halfway through this podcast series, and as I warned back in episode 1, it is a sprawling mess, I thought it might be helpful to have a bit of a recap of what we've heard so far on democracy after disaster. In episode 1, we heard Steve Pascoe's experience of the Black Saturday fires in 2009 and then the recovery of his community of Strathewen.
We need to get ahead of government because they're going to bugger us up if we don't.
We also learned about the deadly systems failures that occurred on that day.
The worst among them, the failure to properly warn communities as fire bore down.
And the critical importance of agency responses being aligned with community needs.
It's so important that communities are not under deadlines.
And how there are some threats to our democratic system which can challenge the simple idea of community-led recovery.
The world is experiencing a wave of democratic erosion.
In episode 2, we went back to 1983 and the Ash Wednesday fires in my hometown of Macedon. We met Morna Kenworthy and watched as she struggled to advocate for her community in the face of a domineering government response.
We were sitting down and they were standing up and they lectured us. There's no other word for it.
And we took a look at the conundrum at the heart of bureaucracy.
The public service is an institution of our responsible government system.
There's always space between the rules or uncertainty or ambiguity about bureaucratic rules, so people have to exercise discretion.
And some of the consequences of our chosen model of representative democracy, where citizenship is reduced to ticking a box once every 3 or 4 years.
And aside from that, there's very little opportunity for people to be directly engaged in politics and kind of get a very passive citizenry.
Then in episode 3, we looked at the long history Indigenous Australians have with fire in the landscape.
Well, the old people always talked about fire and applying fire in a way that is in sync with the seasons and in sync with the breeding times of the animals.
And we then honed in on the Black Friday fires of 1939.
It was a huge change in the way in which people saw Australia, saw the bush and saw their relationship to nature.
We then tracked across the rest of the 20th century and into the 21st, looking at social and political trends and
a whole range of things that local communities did in order to gain much greater control.
We touched on the experiences of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders leading up to the critical year of 1967, when Australians voted overwhelmingly to include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the Constitution, just months after devastating fires killed 62 people in Tasmania.
Many died. More than 600 homes and farms were destroyed.
To come full circle back to 2009 and the looming crisis of Black Saturday. In episode 4, we looked at how the recovery unfolded in King Lake.
Okay, it's time to implement the emergency management plan. Sorry, we don't have one.
And we followed a trail of thought provocations through the lived experience of Daryl Taylor.
For me, the fundamental unit of humanity is community, not individuality.
We looked at the impact of neoliberalism.
Part of the challenge is that a lot of government capability has been hollowed out.
Evolutionary biology.
There are certain cultures evolving and groups that are more or less successful and more or less likely to spread their practices.
The work of Eleanor Ostrom and the fallacy of the tragedy of the commons.
That became almost like a religion.
We looked at falling social capital.
People are exhausted, they're burnt out.
We heard about disaster capitalism.
I think that there's a particular way of thinking that comes with being in the business of disaster.
And the energy and empathy released by disaster.
In the immediate aftermath, people will do incredible things. It happens all over the world. It's laid out in this air.
And finally, in this episode, number 5, we arrived at the most recent major bushfires in Australia, the Black Summer Fires of 2019-2020.
To the south, there were bushfires. To the west, there were bushfires. To the north, there were bushfires.
And the remarkable way recovery unfolded in the remote resort town of Mallacoota.
And 60 people turned up. So it was a big thing. It was important.
We met Jenny Lloyd, the architect of the recovery plan for Mallacoota.
We wrote that plan. It's very much in the language of the audience it's targeting.
And Carol Hopkins.
So many of them did not want to fund wages for anyone. And so that just assumes hundreds of hours of volunteer bloody work. So
that's a wrap for the first half of Democracy After Disaster. The final 4 episodes will be a little different, less chronological, more thematic, although always still grounded in stories and community recovery. Democracy After Disaster is written, produced and hosted by me, Kate Lawrence from Storyground, on the unceded lands of the Woiwurrung-speaking people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to ancestors and elders. I thank them for their careful management of fire in this landscape and their inspiring sense of community. You can find out more about the series on the Storyground website. This project is supported by a grant from the National Australia Bank. If you like the podcast, please rate and review it wherever you listen, and most importantly, tell your colleagues, friends and family. And if you have any comments, questions or feedback, please email me, kate@storyground.com.au. Thanks for listening.